can find a seat, we're just getting started. Sit down.
Grab this one.
I'm thrilled to be here too. It's great to see some old friends again. What I want to talk about today are some trends that are going to shape the entertainment world, and mostly the media business, the TV business and the video business for the next 10 years. I'm Robert Tercek. I am the chairman of the Creative Visions Foundation. I'm on Twitter at Superplex. And let's get started. So we've just passed some amazing milestones. If you didn't notice, the internet has been a thing for 45 years, and the personal computer has been a thing for 40 years. Apple was founded in 1975, and Bill Gates was writing software for the PC in 1975. And this was a surprise. We just passed another threshold. The 25 years of the World Wide Web starts to make you feel kind of old. If you've been working at the coalface of this space for quite a while, I kind of have. So how are we doing? Well, here's a picture of the internet economy. These are some of the countries in the G20. This is data from Boston Consulting Group. And what they're doing here is comparing the size of the internet economy as a percentage of GDP. In each of these countries, they compared 2010 to projections for 2016. So 2016 is the blue, 2010 is the green. And as you can see, the only country that's going to break 10% of their GDP as an internet economy is the UK. Most other countries are hovering around 4 or 5%, and the G20 average will break, in 2016, will break that 5% barrier. So as you can see, the internet economy, as a percentage of total GDP, actually isn't that huge right now. It's still, there's a lot of growth in this space ahead. But what I thought I'd do to put this in perspective is drill down a little bit. And so this slide is a subset. These are just some of the countries in that G20. The China and the US, two biggest economies in the world, India, Canada, Brazil, Italy, Russia, Turkey. And as you can see, they're all hovering around 4%, except for China and the US, that are a little bit, our internet economies are a little bit bigger and more advanced in those two countries. But if you lay this information up against the untaxed, cash-based shadow economy, you can see just how tiny the internet economy really is. The orange here is the same data from Boston Consulting Group, now laid up against data from Statista that shows the untaxed shadow economy. And as you can see in certain countries like Brazil, Russia, and Turkey, that untaxed shadow economy is enormous relative to the internet. Now, I'm not trying to suggest that the internet isn't going to gradually merge into some of those fields and start to see some of those people migrate across. The only point I'm trying to make right now with this is to say that we're at the very early stages still of this digital transformation. Although it's been many years, 40 years of computers, 25 years of the internet, we're still in the early days. Now, we've been told that the network economy will hold a lot of things for us. A democratization of technology, a decentralization of power and diffusion to lots of different people, give everybody a chance to participate. As a previous speaker, Allison, just pointed out, today everybody gets to participate in this medium, everybody who wishes to. It's a kind of two-way exchange, unprecedented exchange. And even though it's still only a small part of the total economy, we're starting to see some massive shifts. And we're starting to see some companies emerge in fields like transportation, retail, commerce, travel, so forth. They're making profound changes even though there's still a relatively small percentage of the economy. So other parts of the economy, traditional parts of the economy, the companies that operate in that space, they're not that excited about the prospect of disruption, so no surprise, there's some resistance. And I think that the phase that we are in right now is one where traditional economy players are going to do everything they possibly can to prevent and stall disruption. And so we end up in a situation of a hybrid economy, a hybrid era. And the resistance from that old economy is going to create some paradoxes. And that's what's going to define the media landscape for the next 10 years. An example of this is Aereo. Everybody knows the company. I was paying attention to them since the early days when they were called Bamboom about 5 years ago. They got started. I thought it was a promising concept. To me, it made a great deal of sense. In 1999, TiVo introduced the concept of time shifting with the DVR that gave people the ability to watch TV programs out of pattern whenever they wanted. And in 2005, the Slingbox introduced the idea that you could move media to whatever location you happen to be at. So if you were traveling and you wanted to watch a local baseball game from a hotel room, you could do so with the Slingbox. Both of those companies survived legal challenges, and so it seemed kind of logical you could combine the two things together and create kind of a cloud-based DVR. At least that was the principle behind Aereo. As we all know now, the broadcasters didn't quite see it the same way, and they sued. There are a couple big lawsuits that found their way through the appeals process to the Supreme Court. And just last fall, the Supreme Court ruled against Aereo. And that seemed like that was the end of the story for the cloud-based video provider. Was it? Well, not quite. Because just a month later, Tom Wheeler, the head of the FCC, announced that he wanted to introduce regulation that would enable internet-based providers to compete on an equal footing against traditional MVPDs, companies like satellite, cable, and telco video providers. And just 1 month after that, we saw a series of announcements, beginning with HBO and their announcement that they're, later this year, going to introduce a direct-to-consumer offering. Very unprecedented concept and radical concept for a company that's entirely a creature of the pay TV ecosystem. Just 1 day later, that announcement was followed by CBS, and just a day after that, it was followed by Univision, who announced that they too were going to offer direct-to-consumer plays. The momentum's increasing in this space. What we saw at CES just last month were a series of announcements around skinny bundles, beginning with Sling, who now is offering an internet-based miniature cable bundle that includes many Disney channels, surprisingly including ESPN, which we thought we'd never see delivered OTT in any way. And that was followed by an announcement from Verizon, who introduced also a skinny bundle, a skinny pay TV bundle, aimed principally at mobile users. And in a moment I'll explain why that's very, very important. But in fact, these announcements aren't really as representative of OTT future, direct-to-consumer future, as they seem, because they're still very much bound up in that old pay TV ecosystem. They're still being provided to you. Largely they're being provided by cable or satellite operators. Largely they're bound to the traditional rules, the bundling agreements that exist that dominate that pay TV environment. And so in a way, this isn't much of a change. This is more of like a way to adapt that bundle to meet the needs of a new customer that's not paying for pay television. So for 20 years now, we've been hearing this concept of convergence between old media and new media. It's a lively idea, but the signs that I see suggest that quite the opposite is happening. It's not about convergence, it's actually the opposite. It's about divergence. Last month, I was invited up to Canada to talk to the Canadian Film Board, now called the Canadian Media Fund. They make investments in media for the Canadians, and they asked me to give them some perspectives. And I said, look, let me give you a metaphor here. Think of this as 2 parallel universes. You have one universe that's converging rapidly. Everything is condensing down to a single hot, dense dot of activity. And in the other universe, you've got rapid expansion, where it's expanding almost infinitely and supremely fast. Okay, so that's kind of a spacey metaphor, and I'm sure you're going, wait a minute, what's he talking about? Let me spell it out for you, make it really clear. The parallel universes I'm talking about are a 20th century model of creating media for a mass market that required massive investments in broadcast and distribution infrastructure, production infrastructure. It was highly centralized because of the scale of those investments, and as a result, consolidation is the name of the game. It's been the name of the game for the past 30 years. And those companies fight very hard to keep that content scarce and expensive. That's how they recover the return on investment in that massive infrastructure. But if you compare that to the 21st century media model, you see it's almost exactly the opposite. Highly decentralized. You have companies now that scale to global levels, reaching hundreds of millions of people, and yet they don't own any infrastructure. They don't need infrastructure. Any individual can actually reach a global audience today without that. And of course that content, because there's so much of it, it's dispersed across so many creators, it's very, very cheap and it's very abundant. So these are 2 completely separate universes. Let's take a look at the consolidating universe of 20th century media. Today, in the United States, 6 major media companies control 90% of electronic media that we consume. 6 companies. I can only fit 4 of them on the screen here. The other 2 are CBS and Disney. Now what you'll notice is that after decades and decades of consolidation, what these companies are is a collection of media assets that spans everything from theme parks and toys to television motion picture studios. But what they really are is a collection of pay TV channels. It's important to understand that the majority of revenue and the great majority of profit for these companies comes from their pay TV operations. So you can say that a motion picture studio today is a subset of a television company. That was unthinkable just 10 years ago or 15 years ago, but that's the fact today. So big media is entirely dependent on pay TV. That's one reason why they're fighting so hard to preserve that bundle. That's where they derive the funding that pays for all the great movies and TV shows that we watch. There's another aspect of consolidation. Is concentration coming? The thought of the merger, the pending merger between Time Warner Cable and Comcast, triggered a whole wave of frenzied speculation in the TV industry. Now that merger may or may not happen. It's been under regulatory review for the better part of a year. It may not happen, but nevertheless, there's already been speculation that there'll be many other mergers. AT&T is already merging with DirecTV. And on the content side, we see that 21st Century Fox wants to acquire Time Warner. They've made one effort. There's speculation they'll renew that effort at the end of 2015. And there's also a lot of chatter right now about Viacom and CBS merging back together. Others speculate that companies like Strix or Discovery might be up for play. So we'll start to see more consolidation happening this year. I think it's a safe bet. You'll see consolidation in the pay TV space. That's not the only kind of consolidation I'm referring to. You're also seeing motion picture companies dramatically downsize their operations, most spectacularly with Warner Brothers and Time Warner. Time Warner has been enjoying record profits for the past few years, and yet they've been aggressively cutting their staff. Turner Broadcasting laying off thousands of employees, Warner Brothers Studio laying off thousands of employees, cutting $200 million out of their operating budget. Even HBO cut a few hundred people from their staff. In a way, it's kind of like premature downsizing. They're trying to fend off News Corp, 21st Century Fox, and so they're trying to keep their productivity high, keep their share price as high as they possibly can. To do that, they're cutting like mad. It's not just the studios that are cutting back, or the TV networks that are cutting back. You're also seeing budgets for programming cut back. Producers are complaining that it's harder than ever to make money in television. And even movie stars are starting to see their fees go down. There's sort of a two-tier caste system for motion picture stars today. So that a film like The Wolf of Wall Street, Leonardo DiCaprio could get paid $20 million while his co-star Jonah Hill got paid scale for a chance to work with Martin Scorsese and get an Oscar nomination. So you're starting to see consolidation in that respect. And there's one more kind of consolidation to talk about, which is that the big media companies are now starting to buy multi-channel networks, starting with DreamWorks acquiring Awesomeness TV, Disney's billion-dollar acquisition of Maker Studios, Peter Chernin, the former head of Fox, working with AT&T to buy Full Screen, and the German broadcaster RTL acquiring Style Hall, and in Canada they acquired majority interest in broadband TV. But these traditional media companies, what they're buying is very different from their traditional television business. It's extremely different. What they're buying into is the 21st century media model. These MCNs operate on a completely different economic model. They're making programming that isn't written by a committee, it's written by a single person. They aren't really buying branded IP as much as they're buying into personalities. And the personalities, in a way, when they perform, what they're doing is more like improv than scripted entertainment. So these are radically different kinds of programming. And as the previous speaker, Allison, just pointed out, it's not just the kinds of content and the production model that have changed, but the marketing and distribution model have changed entirely as well. So this is very much a different universe for these big media companies. Most of the value in new media, in digital media today, is going to platform operators. And that's a very important message for people who operate in the 20th century model. If they're entering this space, they have to understand that in this 21st century, TV is just another app on somebody else's platform. And there are a lot of apps, 1.3 million apps Apple announced in September. Well, that's great news for Apple. They generated $14 billion in the App Store, and largely that's from apps revenue. Of that, Apple keeps $4 billion of that. That's more than they made the first 3 years of operating the App Store overall. So that's great if you're Apple. If you're a TV company, not so much. You're finding your channels and your programming is getting kind of unbundled, cherry-picked apart, and you have to fight amongst dozens and dozens, really thousands of other providers. And so a lot of that great brand value that our broadcasters have built up is dissipated in this app environment. They're also finding new competition. Here, for example, major newspapers are starting to are aggressively going into the video space on all the digital platforms. Why not? They have no more print business to protect, so there really is no reason for them not to charge into video. And so you find all kinds of competition. The most interesting competition for them, I find, in the mobile space comes from all of these new apps. I was pleased that Allison previously spoke about Vine. It's really important to pay attention to these new apps. The mobile apps are teaching us to think of video in an entirely different way. It's not something that you just sit there and watch. It's something that you play with, you respond to, you communicate with, and most importantly, the video is disposable. Where all of Hollywood is oriented to thinking of video as a priceless artifact that has to be preserved, stored, archived, and managed. These apps are teaching consumers something exactly the opposite. They're teaching consumers that video is disposable. These changes are going to cause us to rethink everything. We have to rethink our audience. This is your audience today. We call them millennials, we call them Generation Z, but really they're the mobile audience. They're the smartphone audience. It's important to understand that while TV companies are struggling with the concept of the second screen, they've already made their mind up which one is the first screen. There's no question about it. How many people had a chance to talk to a 5-year-old kid and show them how to use a tablet computer? This is one of the funnest things to do if you haven't done it. Raise your hand if you've had, okay, so yes, of course. There's always some people who have had that experience. If you haven't done it, here's what happens. You sit down with a 5-year-old on the couch, you show them a tablet, they're like, oh, that's cool, and then they immediately want to start to touch it because they see it's responsive, and they screw up a little bit, but after a few minutes, they start to figure out how to go back and forth and hit that home button. So they start to understand how to use that tablet. Within a half an hour, they're experts, and then they do something that is completely chilling if you're in the TV business. They put the tablet down on the couch, and they walk across the room to the big flat screen TV, and they start to touch the screen. And at that point, the dad is in the room, and he's about to jump out of his chair because he's worried about getting fingerprints on his beautiful LED screen. The kids do something different. They start to swipe and tap, and nothing happens. And then they turn to their moms, and they say, Mama, broken. An entire generation is being trained by mobile devices to look at the television and any non-responsive screen as broken. Half of digital media consumption today happens on mobile devices. And as you can see, all the growth in mobile is coming from apps. All of the growth. The web is not just the fastest growing medium in the world. Desktop web is also going to be the fastest to decline as well. Mobile is eating up the web right now. In fact, mobile is the only medium that's growing of all media that are out there. Netflix understands this the best. They've always made it a priority to port to make sure their service is available native for every device. No surprise for 18 to 34-year-olds, half of them watch Netflix on their mobile phone. I introduced mobile video in the United States in 2000, and most of the media companies thought I was crazy because the concept of watching video on a phone just seemed so alien to them. But for this generation, it's quite natural. 85% of the people who own a tablet watch video and television on it. And naturally, advertisers start to see this as a great big opportunity. It's probably the only growth opportunity if you're in the advertising business. So you've got to really rethink your prioritization if you want to reach this audience. Mobile has to become a big priority for you. We also need to rethink channels. We're moving into a world where nonlinear programming, unbundled video, is a reality. More than half the video that's consumed in the United States is now watched in a nonlinear fashion. You can see from this chart that in the past 8 years, there's been a steady decline in live viewing of in-pattern broadcast TV. That habit is going away. It's actually dying off. A young generation is coming along that just doesn't have that habit at all. VOD means the end of channels. In fact, digital means the end of packaged entertainment as we understand it. In the past, we always sold media. We always sold media in the form of a fixed medium. So we sold music as discs, and we counted the number of albums that were sold. We sold video in the form of channels. So we were selling the channel or the container as a proxy for the content. But what digital allows us to do is unzip that container and siphon the content right out of it and consume it in lots of interesting and new ways. Traditional media companies have yet to really contend with this and understand it. They're really trying to resurrect those economics of bundling in these new media platforms. That's a very, very challenging thing to do. So television is booming, but time slots are fading, and what this article argued is that college-age students don't really have an understanding of the distinction between Netflix, cable channels, and broadcast channels. From their standpoint, it's all just shows on devices. We also need to rethink scale. You know, in the old days, we used to dismiss digital video. The old days, 2007, 2008, 2009, we used to dismiss digital video as something rather small. You're all familiar with this chart. This chart shows you that in the first 5 years of operations, YouTube experienced exponential growth in video uploads. This is video uploaded per minute to YouTube. And in 2013, 100 hours of video was uploaded every minute of the day to YouTube. But that was 2013, so I went back to check to see if that's changed any, and indeed it has. Last year in 2014, 300 hours of video was uploaded every minute of the day to YouTube. So what you need to do when you think of YouTube is think of this rapidly expanding universe of video where Hollywood can only increase linearly. Have we got time? Okay, I'll wrap it up. No problem, I'm almost done here. This chart is from Media Redefined. It's an eye chart, I'm sorry about that. But it laid up the biggest MCNs against the biggest cable channels. And as you can see, in terms of minutes of video produced, those MCNs are generating as much video as some of the top 100 cable channels. They're not yet competing with the top 50 channels, but you can see that companies like Maker and Fullscreen are generating approximately the same amount of video per month as cable channels are. Now you might say, yeah, but it's crappy quality, nobody's really watching it, they have no reach. Well, that's not true. That's no longer the case. Just last month, BuzzFeed introduced these charts on their blog, which I thought were quite useful. This shows that BuzzFeed on a monthly basis has a reach that is actually greater than MTV and Comedy Central, which is kind of astonishing. BuzzFeed Video didn't exist until 2012. So out of nowhere, they've emerged. And when you look at the crucial 18 to 34 demographic, you can see that BuzzFeed eclipses everybody, including the major broadcast channels, NBC and CBS. This is going to cause us to rethink advertising. I need to wrap it up, so I'm going to fly through this section. The main thing you need to know about advertising is this empowered audience has the power not to watch advertising. This is showing the number of installs of AdBlocker Plus, the most popular plugin on any browser. In a 6-month span last year, they had a 70% growth spike, and that continues to this day. 25% of browsers in the UK, 29% in the US, and half the browsers in Germany have AdBlock Plus installed on them. These people have the ability to not see the advertising feature visits going. For media companies, this is a real problem. Here's Lyft begging their audience to watch the ad, and if not, they're going to block you with this message for 90 seconds. The ad's only 30 seconds, so they're trying to bribe you to give back some of your time. I think the more interesting thing to watch is Twitch. A lot of people in the TV business were unaware of Twitch, or unaware of the Twitch transaction when Amazon did it. They should pay attention to it. It's very important. The reason people didn't pay attention to it is Twitch allows gamers to broadcast video from their desktop while they're playing. A lot of people don't understand why anyone would watch that. Who needs that service? Well, it turns out quite a few people do. 55 million people watch it every single night. The average viewing time is 90 minutes. They reach 500,000 people in prime time. That's more than MTV, Sci-Fi, and TNT in their prime time hours. And these are a highly committed audience. What's really important to know about Twitch is that Amazon's going to build in-game commerce. So while you're watching the video streams, you won't have to watch an ad, you won't be interrupted with a commercial. Instead, the gamer himself will be able to tell you what gear he uses, what equipment he uses, what games he prefers, and he'll get a commission on every sale. This is a fascinating concept. I urge you to check it out. Anyway, my message to you today is simply, if you're going to be operating in this space, please try to be aware of which universe you're operating in, that 20th century model, the 21st century model. I'm Robert Tercek from the Creative Visions Foundation.